What is going on, you guys? This is part 5 of my recap for the great series 3 Body. Episode 21 opens in the interrogation room, where Captain Shai was investigating Mr. Pan as he was the last person who saw Shen alive. There was a security camera inside the house that was technically supposed to capture everything, but Mr. Pan goes on to say to Captain Shai, since there were security cameras, it should be evidence enough that he was innocent. And this was quite confusing as we witnessed him kill Shen on the last episode, but when the security tapes are obtained, we see that none of that happened. Mr. Pan actually visited Shen, and when he left she was perfectly fine, but after sitting on her chair for quite a while, she decided to take her own life. And all of this was captured by the video feed. Captain Shai goes on to say to Mr. Pan that he threatened Shen's husband and that he destroyed his computer, which was an act of violence, but Mr. Pan goes on to explain that he was trying to stop Shen and her husband from solving the 3-body problem, and that why Shen decided to off herself was because he finally revealed to her the truth. Realizing that there was no hope in detaining Mr. Pan, Captain Shai decides to release him and then goes to Shen's husband to tell him what happened to his wife. Wei Cheng, Shen's husband, was passed out on the floor after drinking a lot of alcohol, and Captain Shai wakes him up and breaks the bad news to him. And Wei Cheng, who's not completely mentally stable, didn't really know how to react to seeing his wife's corpse and just continued to do his calculations as it's the only thing that he knows how to do. Meanwhile, back at the office, Wang was getting very emotional about Shen's death because whatever it was that he could do, everybody around him was dying. Captain Shai tells him to be emotionless about these situations because the criminals that do these kinds of things don't feel anything, but these words didn't really mean anything to Wang. Seconds later, he finally receives that email from 3-body inviting him to attend a conference of 3-body players. And as our scene shifts to the next one, Wang goes to the conference but finds out that it's mostly empty and there are only a few people inside the very big auditorium. They all start to have a conversation, and Wang discovers that everyone there is a renowned scholar, and moments later, the person who sent the email to all of them, who was apparently Mr. Pan, reveals himself. Wang sends messages to Shai telling him everything that's going on, and Shai tells him to be attentive and to notice everything, and to finally report back once the conference was finished. After Mr. Pan's monologue, most of the attendees try to explain their situation and their relationship to the 3-body problem. Some of them were obsessed with the issue, and some of them only found meaning in that problem, and the game 3-body was a central figure in their lives. After some back and forth with the attendees and Mr. Pan, Wang decides to ask Mr. Pan the most important question, which was asking if 3-body was just a game. Mr. Pan doesn't directly answer this, and he goes on to explain that the world of 3-body, or Trisolarian, has so much to offer to everybody invited there, but they would have to find out for themselves, and it would take time to reveal true answers. One of the attendees would ask what these Trisolarians would look like, these people who exist on a plane with 3 suns, and Mr. Pan goes on to explain that the game accurately represents their ability to rehydrate, as they have evolved to do so, because without the ability to dehydrate at will, the continuation of such a civilization would be impossible. Wang then asks Mr. Pan if the 3 suns really exist, and Mr. Pan says yes directly, and tells him that it's the nature of Trisolarians, and how they came to be what they are. Another person asks what the goal of the game was, and Mr. Pan goes on to say that the goal was to bring people together with common ideals. And when Wang asks about what these ideals might be, Mr. Pan goes on to say that the Trisolarian society was real and that they were looking for a new home, and goes on to ask them what they feel about that. And one by one, most of the employees agreed that they would help this new civilization find a new home on Earth, as they feel as though humanity needs a push in the right direction. And even though he might not see eye to eye with this idea, Wang also decides to join this group, and the remaining people inside the auditorium are told to go home, as Mr. Pan has finally made his selection. And finally, Wang goes to Shai's office and explains everything he found out about the 3-body problem. Wang is now sure that the Trisolarians live and exist on their own plane, and they've been surviving with 3 suns. He tells him that the point of the game was to discover that there was no solution to the 3-body problem. There was no way to predict when the chaotic era would end and the stable era would begin, so it would make it very difficult to survive in such an environment. And because of that difficulty, that specific civilization has seen a lot of hardships, and most of their societies have collapsed repeatedly. The last time Wang was inside the game, the civilization was about to reach the modern era, but it would have kept getting destroyed over and over again, and the people inside that civilization would still need to find a way out. When Captain Shai asks Wang to explain what all of this means, he explains to Shai that since the Trisolarians are constantly discovering new sciences and also growing much more rapidly than human beings, at some point they've become a much more advanced civilization, and they've realized that there is no solution to the three-body problem, as it's impossible to survive on a planet with 3 suns. And so, their only viable option has now become traveling to Earth in order to ensure the survival of their species. And Wang goes on to reveal something even more scarier as he talks about the Aztecs and how they were destroyed by a more advanced civilization, and how the same thing will probably happen when the Trisolarians come to Earth. Shai relays all of this to General Chang, who informs all his military operatives internationally of the situation, and they all agree to stick together and find a solution against the impending doom. Next we see Captain Shai going to see Mu Xing, the reporter, and she was also very skeptical of Mr. Pawn and planted a virus on his laptop and got a bunch of encrypted files. And when she gave the flash drive to Shai, they would decode it to find ETO members, who are people trying to help the Trisolarians in achieving their plan and coming to Earth. As General Chang and the military group try to arrest all these people, we see that Mr. Pawn leaked this information on purpose, as he wanted all of them to be detained by the military, and as the episode wraps up, he makes a call to Evans and informs him to shut down the three-body game servers, as he doesn't want another redemptionist uprising, because as he puts it, people always try to survive when they realize that doom is upon them. And Mr. Pawn didn't want another person like Shen, who was trying to solve the problem in order to save humanity. As episode 22 kicks off, we see Commander Yi being begged by Chen not to attend Shen's funeral, as all the redemptionists on Mr. Pawn's leaked file have all been arrested, and Chen is afraid that the military will also seize Yi. She also fears as though attending Shen's funeral will seem as though she's an ally to the redemptionists, and the Adventists will take this as a threat and try to snuff Yi out. But even though Chen tries to reason with Yi, Yi explains that she must pay her respects to Shen and leaves the house. A couple of scenes later, we realize that she didn't actually attend the funeral, but went to a Buddhist prayer site to give her condolences to Shen and to honor her religion. Yi wasn't the only one who was feeling badly about Shen's death, as we witnessed Captain Shai and Wang sharing a meal and talking about how they always thought that Shen would be their enemy, and it was too late when they realized that she was actually an ally. Back at the command center, everyone was trying their best to shut down the three-body game servers. They assumed the servers would be located in Europe, but they find out that the servers are actually mobile, and they're not actually on Earth, they're technically in a satellite hovering over the European continent. The military command center weren't the only ones trying to shut down the game, as Mr. Pawn initiates the program to take down the game from the servers once and for all. But as he was attempting to do so, Wang has already logged into the game and witnesses the last stage that the game reached before it finally came to its conclusion. And when he logged inside the game this time, he couldn't believe what he saw with his eyes. The three-body game in the Trisolarian society has reached such an advanced technology that they've now reached the ability to navigate the stars, and everyone in the three-body world has gathered to see the departure of spaceships going to a star 4 light years away to find a new home for the Trisolarian society. They've also achieved incredible amounts of speed, and before Wang left, it was announced that it would take them about 400 years until they reach their new planet, but when Wang does the calculation, it should technically only be 40 years. Wang talks about this miscalculation with Captain Shai, and they attempt to speculate as to why the game claimed that it would take 400 years, and the best guess that they came up with was that the game was trying to deceive them into making them think that they had more time so that they'd be caught off guard when the Trisolarians finally make it to their world. Another speculation that Captain Shai had was that Wang could potentially be right in his calculations, but the Trisolarians started their journey 40 years ago and they're gonna be here in any moment. But even with all the speculations either way, both Captain Shai and Wang realize that their time was running out. When they get to the office, the general showcases what he found out about the frontiers of science. He realizes that there are 3 warring fractions within the group. The Redemptionists want to solve the three-body problem in order to save humanity, and the Adventists want humanity to be destroyed as they don't believe mankind has the ability to lead and govern itself. And then there's a third fraction that both fractions look down upon called the Survivalists, who believe that even if the Trisolarians come to their planet, they wouldn't harm humanity at all. But to all of these groups, General Chang realizes that there must be some kind of leader, and with all their findings and research, they've identified members of the ETO, calling this leader Commander. Meanwhile, Mr. Pawn keeps leaking information to the reporter, and this time he wanted media coverage on all the redemptionists that were arrested in Europe. Captain Shai told Mu Xing to stop investigating this case, but she kept pursuing it and he almost arrested her, until she said that she'd stop the investigation and have all the information she needed by 4 p.m. But what Mu Xing didn't know was that Mr. Pan was setting her up. He knew that she couldn't be trusted all along and that she didn't care about him, and he was just using her as a means to an end. We see him arranging a meeting with Cheng, the protector of Commander Yi, and telling her that the commander's secret and identity was in jeopardy and that there was a dangerous reporter that was investigating her. And unfortunately for Mu Xing, before she actually gets to discover that Commander Yi was the one who was in charge of everything, Cheng tracked her down and killed her. The crime scene was incredibly harrowing for Captain Shai, as he expected to see her just a few hours later, and knowing Mu Xing and investigating her scooter, he would find a second recording device. The recording kept going for long, and Captain Shai was able to decipher a conversation and also some background noise from a pharmacy, and from all the evidence that he could find, they find out that the woman was actually Shen, and the episode wraps up with Shai ordering her arrest, and Shu and Captain Shai informing Wang of the new development that Mu Xing was murdered. At the beginning of episode 23, Captain Shai and Wang begin to get confused as to what Mu Xing discovered before she was murdered. They realize the information that Mu discovered was that whoever the commander was, they attended Xinhua University, but they come at a standstill when Wang talks about how Yi attended it when she was young, and Shu tells him that her sister's daughter, who happens to be Chen, also attended the very same university. Yi also works in Xinhua University, and this was overwhelming evidence that Yi is completely involved in the frontiers of science and that she's at the middle of the investigation. Wang still doubted that Yi had anything to do with this, as Yang Dong, her daughter, died because of the frontiers of science, and he doesn't believe that Yi is an evil person that would actually kill her daughter. This really upsets Captain Shai, as he believes that Wang is being weak about all this, and that the ETO and the extraterrestrials will use this weakness against him and take down all of humanity. He urges him to get his priorities straight and to never empathize with the enemy. And next, as our scene moves along, we take a look at Yi inside her house, being urged by Chen to call on the conference and to also send her final command to gather all of the ETO members. Meanwhile, Captain Shai gets full authorization to have command over enough manpower, and Yi has Chen send out the email that's gonna invite all of the ETO members at one location. But when going through her trash bin, Chen and Yi discover that some of the files that they sent confidentially has been recovered on the computer and was sent out to somewhere else. When the day of the conference finally arrives, Captain Shai tells Wang exactly what to do and how to react, and to try to not be seen amongst the crowds, and to also not worry, as she'll be monitoring everything that's going on the inside. Wang now walks on foot to a bunch of abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere, and when he got there, there were so many trucks and so many guards that were overlooking everything. Soon as he made it inside to where all the ETO members were, he gets startled by the fact that everyone was arguing with everyone else. And the moment he saw it, it was simply pure madness. From afar, he sees Mr. Pan Han standing still, looking out to the screaming and agitated crowd with curiosity. Wang tries to fit in and tries not to attract any attention to himself, and all of a sudden, the screaming stops, and one of the ETO members accuses Mr. Pan of murdering Shen. And to everyone's surprise, Mr. Han does not deny it. He says that Shen was a thorn in their back, and that she was gonna sabotage all of the ETO, and then goes on to say that somebody needed to be responsible and take care of her. This angers most of the crowd, who were redemptionists, and who considered Shen to be their leader. As the conversation with Mr. Pan continues, he gets accused of using Lord's power to his own will, gain, and interest, and that the only thing that he serves is his own self-interest and not the interest of the ETO or the Trisolarians. But he goes on to explain that he never gained anything for himself and that he really doesn't care about anything but the common good. This conversation fuels the rest of the ETO members to start arguing and screaming again until Commander Yi arrives on the scene and she confronts Mr. Pan Han herself. He first had the audacity to ask if she's an actual Adventist and to officially declare to everyone there which side that she serves, but things don't really go well for Mr. Pan Han, as the commander accuses him of sabotage and also hiding Lord's information and using everything to his advantage to hide the real purpose of the Adventists, which is the destruction of mankind. This claim is not only backed by Commander Yi herself, but also another member of the ETO who happens to be an Adventist and backs Yi on the idea that the Adventists want the destruction of mankind. After making her case to all of the ETO members, Yi didn't hesitate to have Chen kill Mr. Pan on the spot. As soon as this happens, Yi turns to Wang as she's located him in the crowd and introduces him to everyone else as their new member. She also talks about how he works in nanotech and how the Lord is technically focused on eliminating that field of study first. When Wang asks why the Lord was so focused on nanomaterials, Yi again recounts her time at the Red Coast base and tells everyone the biggest problem that she encountered while using the very big satellite, which was their inability to transmit any signal because of solar interference. She puts her theory forward to her superiors at the time, claiming that she can somehow solve the problem if she's given the resources and time, and after much deliberation, Federation, she's authorized to experiment with her theory. But even after a lot of days, weeks, and months, she encounters a problem with the sun's fluctuations, and she faces a difficulty finding a source for these fluctuations, meaning that her theory is gonna fail unless she finds the source. And that is where episode 23 leaves us, and as we begin episode 24, we take a look at the young Yi almost submitting a report to her superiors, and then ends up snooping on their conversation, and realizes that they're gonna shut down her research if she fails, and this truly upsets her as she doesn't want to lose access to the library and all the new equipment that she has access to. Yi goes on to explain that she genuinely believed that with more time and dedication that she can solve this interference problem with their signal, but her superiors thought it would be a dead end if she comes into a standstill. Yi goes on to narrate that she didn't actually submit the report because of this issue, and she went on recalibrating and redoing the experiment over and over again as she never wanted to give up. She goes on to read as many documents as possible until she stumbles upon a research paper written by Dr. Harry Peterson. And his paper gave her the kickstart to really calculate why there was an interference and how there's a relationship between Jupiter, Earth, and the Sun. And after very long nights of study and calculations, she came up with an amazing hypothesis and showed it to Yang, her superior. And her hypothesis was that the interference was actually coming from Jupiter and that the Sun actually amplifies radio signals. And if their goal was to reach aliens outside of space, she posits that they can use the Sun, which is a radio amplifier, and shoot all the waves directly at the Sun, which is actually incredibly risky. Her theory seems possible, and she goes on to tell Yang that she needs to talk to Harry Peterson, who's in the US, but he explains to her that that's gonna be quite difficult as they weren't really talking to the US at the time. Yang also goes on to explain that Lei, their superior, is not going to stand for this, as broadcasting a signal directly to the Sun has a lot of ramifications. But Yang was quite impressed with the research that Yi did, but even though they showcased their paper to Lei, he was incredibly upset as he would never allow such a thing to happen considering all the risks. For the next few days, Yang tried to convince his superior and friend to let Yi run this experiment, but to no avail. And Yi lost all hope in her experiment that she believed deep down in her heart would work. And as time went on, she became a technician and started fixing stuff, and her responsibilities were also lowered as her experiment was deemed a failure. But one day, as an alarm went off in the operation room where she was doing some repairs, and most of the employees were either tired or sleepy, she would trick one of the operators into pretending that she was repairing something, and she would then go on to enter her coordinates and run the experiment by sending the signal directly to the Sun. There was a lot of hesitation, and she didn't really think that she'd actually pull it off, but even though she managed to do so and went to Yang immediately and asked him to monitor a certain signal if it's gonna bounce back, she gets disappointed immediately as her theory that she believed in so much didn't actually work. Yang tries to cheer her up, telling her that he actually contacted Dr. Peterson and gives her a letter from Peterson himself, and when analyzing the data, Yi realizes that most of her discoveries were actually wrong. Yang was incredibly scared and upset by what she did, as it's actually considered treason and there was a potential where both of them could have been executed. He tells her not to tell anyone of this incident and to forget about it completely. But Yi goes on to narrate that later, her experiments didn't actually fail, but her signals jumped off Jupiter and actually hit the Sun and was broadcast to the outer Milky Way. But at the time, she lost all hope and everything seemed to be mundane and pointless aside from one thing. Years later, her and Yang would get married, and even though Yang lost his position as a higher official and became a random technician because of the marriage, as Yi was considered a liability to the party, life for Yi became incredibly sweet and she finally started to live again. But even though Yang and Yi tried to disappear their lives inside the camp, humanity was wreaking havoc on the Earth. And one day, as she was doing a routine checkup, she would finally hear the signal that she sent out months ago. It bounced back and there was actually a response, and her signal indicator pointed out the fact that it was a very strong signal, meaning that at the other end of the line that there was an actual intelligent species that intercepted her signal. Episode 25 continues from where we left off, as the young Yi discovers the strong signal that came from outer space. She translates the numerical signals that were sent to her, and even though it took her a couple of hours to get the entire message, she finally gets it translated, and she discovers that it says to not answer the message, and that the person who intercepted her signal considers themselves a pacifist, and they go on to explain that if she sends a signal again, she'll be traced, and that her planet will be invaded and conquered. The return signal came from Alpha Centauri. It came from the Trisolarian society, whose civilization was destroyed over and over again without stop. And once she traced the signal and she decoded the message, Yi would delete every trace that the signal reached the station, and she'd make sure that nobody else saw the very same message that she intercepted. And even though the message told her not to answer and to never answer the call again, Yi uses the Red Coast base and sends the signal once more. As the world around her was descending into chaos, she's realized that she needs the higher life forms to come to Earth Earth, as she believed that human beings have lost the ability to fix all their problems. After sending the signal, she goes out on the snow again and passes out, but luckily for her, Yang got to her before she became hypothermic. He tells her to tell him everything, and since they're married, he goes on to add that they can burden any problems that she may be facing personally together. And it was also on that very same day that Yi discovered that she was pregnant. Yi continues to tell her story and starts talking about why Lord wants to extinguish nanomaterial research. She tells everyone that it's because it allows humans to escape gravity, and when Wang asks her a bunch of questions about it, she speaks of the possibility of building a space elevator that will let human beings travel to outer space. And Wang then goes on to add that if they discover this, that any other researcher will also discover it and make the device in time, but Yi adds that any researcher who attempts to do so would be bombarded with so much confusion and fear that they would always fail to run their experiments properly. Hearing this, Wang recalls just how afraid and confused he was when he first started to see the numbers inside his head. Wang then goes on to ask Yi just how it is that her daughter Yang Dong died. But before she answers, we see that Captain Shai has called the military reinforcements, and they were driving like lunatics armed to the teeth to get to their destination. The International Military Command Center was also overseeing the entire operation, and slowly, the soldiers infiltrate the building and take out the guards one by one. They were highly coordinated and highly technical, and before anybody knew it, they had the entire building surrounded. They then throw a flashbang into the room where all the ETO members were, and as everyone was experiencing disorientation, the soldiers make their way and try to take out the guards that were inside. It was chaos as so many of them get shot, and everyone inside begins to panic. But before Captain Shai makes it to Yi, who was surrounded by her guards, and Shen threatens Captain Shai with a small nuclear weapon, informing him that she'll use it if he comes any closer. Shen lets everybody know that they're not going to treat them like normal human beings, as they're now trying to bring the downfall of humanity, and that there wasn't really anything that they could do to avoid being taken into custody. As all the chaos was taking place, Shu has safely taken Wang out of the building, and we see that Captain Shai is not bluffing with his claims about taking everybody in, but neither was Yi and her comrades. For a while, it was a Mexican standoff, then in the blink of an eye, a sniper takes a shot and takes out one of the guards, and Captain Shai shoots the sphere in Shen's hand. And even though it didn't let off a nuclear reaction, the explosion was incredibly big, and there was enough radiation to poison everybody around. Injured and bleeding, Captain Shai survives the blast and tells the guards surrounding Yi to drop their weapons. Seeing that there was no way out and that the military had the upper hand, Yi finally surrenders. But as the very intense scene comes to a wrap-up, we understand that the explosion was massive and that the radiation released can potentially poison and kill Captain Shai. And as episode 25 begins to wrap up, it ends with an interrogation of Yi by General Chang, asking her why she was a murder suspect in the 70s, and it's revealed to us that it was Yi who admits to killing Yang and Li back in the 70s. She goes on to tell her story at the Red Coast base, and even though Yi did her best to hide all the signals that were coming from the extraterrestrial beings, Lei has intercepted the same message that she received, as he was running a highly clandestine operation that nobody knew about. And with their conversation, it was made evident to her that he wanted to keep everything a secret, as he wanted to come out as the first person who discovered extraterrestrials inside of space. But Yi had already made her decision, and she was not going to let this happen, as she required the Trisolarians to come to Earth and cleanse humanity of its problems.